Chapter 196. The Fount of Light, 8. They had been created using the remains of the Holy Emperor. Eugene had a hard time coming to an understanding. It was a statement far removed from any realm of understanding. No. Come to think of it, perhaps it wasn't that hard to comprehend after all. Eugene was a wizard who had learned magic in the magic kingdom of Aroth by studying papers and accumulating magical knowledge. It was widely known that magical experiments performed on humans were commonplace 300 years ago. In those chaotic times, black wizards conducted experiments on humans without hesitation. But although human experiments were most common during the chaotic era, it did not mean that human experiments didn't exist at other times. Rather, such experiments existed in any era, and the experimenters were not always black wizards either. There were many crazies among wizards, and such wizards often disregarded morals to satisfy their curiosities or magical inspirations. However, whatever vision they had did not warrant lunatic madness, inhumanity, or disregard for ethics. If imagination was all it took, then even Eugene could come up with many ideas that would be frowned upon in practice. To put it into perspective, magic experiments performed on humans were considered taboo, but the same wasn't true with experiments on monsters. If one could ignore the hesitation and aversion they felt deep inside their heart, any wizard could simply cut and modify a monster and toy with it. So the idea itself was simple. Conduct the exact same experiment with no changes and simply replace the monster with a human. When Eugene contemplated it as such, he could understand everything Anise mentioned all too easily. The first saintess had been made using the remains of the Holy Emperor. The oldest and highest value sacred relic of Ura's had been transplanted into the body of a young immature girl. A rib of the Holy Emperor had been grafted into the first saintess. The remains of the Holy Emperor contained a massive amount of divine power that no priest could ever hope to encompass. Regardless of how faithful a priest was to the light and how devoted they were in their prayers, they could never come to possess anything close to the divine power directly contained within the sacred relic. Thus the saintess was made. The saintess was most appropriately called an imitation incarnation, and at the same time she was a sacred weapon capable of producing countless miracles. The saintess alone could keep in check other religions and heretics that opposed Ura's, and many non-believers were fascinated by her existence and converted to Ura's. They never lived long, said Anise. It was expected. The light of God had been imbued into the body of an ordinary girl through the medium of the Holy Emperor's remains. Although the saintess could create miracles, she could never live long due to the burden of carrying the light. Anise continued, but the first saintess represented something great for the ancient fanatics and their lunatic works. They found joy in having created an incarnation of light with their own hands, and they were thrilled that their creation would acquire a stigmata. The saintess was an imperfect being. Every time she brought a miracle, a scar not engraved by a human hand would appear on her small body. Although the scar was only about a palm's length in size, the fanatics never doubted that the stigmata was proof of their faith. Through the existence of the stigmata, they believed that the light was looking after them and that their actions had not been immoral. Many more followed after the first saintess. They were created and they died. Their remains became sacred relics to serve as containers for the light, and the remains were transplanted into the next generation of candidates, said Anise. The relics of the Holy Emperor were so precious that they had rarely been touched since the creation of the first saintess. Instead, the remains of the saintess had taken their place. Stability-wise, it actually worked better to use the remains of one saintess to create the next. The downside was that a saintess created from the remains of another could not perform miracles the same way the first saintess could. As such, their powers were supplemented using other methods. Ura's had acquired many types of magic during the hunt from the past, but their spoils weren't limited to just magic. In their reckless hunt for black wizards and normal wizards, the inquisitors of Ura's acquired the research of the wizards and the corresponding fruits. In addition, many of the captured wizards were tortured and enslaved rather than killed. With such help, the study of making the imitation incarnation made significant progress. In particular, among the trophies obtained from magic hunting, the most valuable was blood magic. By combining blood magic and the results of other pieces of research, Ura's created a method to impregnate the saintess with more divine power. The final result was the Fount of Light. As long as new saintesses continued to be born, the fount would never dry up. In the end, everyone is lying, said Anise with a smile. Even the stigmata of the Pope and the cardinals aren't directly bestowed on them by God. They are simply artificial engravings copied from the stigmata that appeared on the saintess, etched by carefully selected priests who would never divulge the secret because they are fanatical and upright in the light. The artificial stigmata do not actually contain any power. However, Eugene remembered Anise's bare back from the past. The scar had deepened and spread with every miracle she had caused. Moreover, Anise was a special existence in Ures. She was unique even among the many saintesses that had existed since the far past, and the miracles she produced were by far the greatest. I was special, she continued after a pause. Her voice was clear, but Anise was no longer smiling. It was like that ever since I was young. During that era there were other candidates who were unknown to the world, but I was the most outstanding of them all. It had been inevitable for her to be special. With the creation of the Fount of Light, failures to empower the saintess became few and far between. However, it was still impossible to artificially expand their limits. In order to create a proper imitation incarnation out of a saintess, it was necessary to use the sacred relic of the Holy Emperor. But although imbuing the power of the Holy Empire's remains was tried several times since the first saintess, it never resulted in real success. So another method was devised. Since it was impossible for the imitation incarnation to conceive, an immature fetus was transplanted into their womb instead. After experiencing many failures and utilizing all kinds of divine and normal magic, a child was finally born from the imitation incarnation. The newborn was subject to all sorts of terrible experiments from an early age. Even before she could walk, she was cradled by the Fount of Light, forced to cling to the flickering flame of her life. Then what little remained of the Holy Emperor's remains were transplanted into the child's body, little by little. The bones were ground and soaked into the child's wounds, and blood modified using blood magic was propelled into the child's heart. Thus, Ures gave birth to an imitation incarnation that was close to perfection. She was born with an incredibly powerful stigmata, even compared to the first saintess, and the stigmata grew more powerful and larger with every miracle that was summoned. Moreover, her very existence deserved to be called a proof of divinity because she could transfer and engrave the stigmata on high-ranking priests and allow them to produce lesser miracles as well. I hated this nation, whispered Anise. I could never feel any love for it. In fact, I wanted the demons and the demon kings to wipe out this country altogether. She continued, if I had lived only in Ures, I would have lived with such hatred all my life. However, I was given the opportunity to leave Ures. Sir Vermouth was chosen by the Holy Sword, and I was chosen to join him on his journey as the saintess. Hamel, what kinds of things do you think I felt and experienced on that journey? Eugene quietly peered into Anise's eyes. It was difficult to identify any emotions in those still blue eyes. It had been like that in his previous life as well. Anise never fully revealed herself. Instead, she always buried her true feelings behind her thick, saintly smile. Despite the terrible deeds of Ures, I felt that God was real. I eventually came to believe that miracles truly existed. I despised my existence and everything about me. Everything was dreadful. But I realized that the world was even more disastrous and pitiful, said Anise. She had seen too much, way too much. I never wanted to admit it, but in those days we were the miracles. Sir Vermouth, Sienna, Mullen, me and you, Hamel. We were all miracles. We had the power to save the world, and we did save it, although it was slightly lacking. What we failed to save were those who were already dead. And you, Hamel. Eugene could not find any words to say. I'm sure it was the same for all of us. On that journey, everyone felt something and everyone changed. I came to believe in and rely on God. I started to yearn for heaven, and I was possessed with the aspiration to lead everyone to heaven as well, explained Anise. Change. Eugene didn't deny it. At some point, the purpose of his journey had changed as well. Hamel did not have a grand ambition of saving the world from the beginning. He simply wanted revenge. Since the world was thrown into shit and he along with it, he wanted those who were responsible, the demons and the demon kings, to suffer the same way he did. But at some point he began to entertain something more. He began to have thoughts of saving the world. It was inevitable for people to die on the battlefield, but he wanted fewer people to die. Instead of fixating only on killing the demon kings, he began to imagine what the world would be like after the demon kings were defeated. You. Eugene let out a long sigh. You could not go to heaven. It was too early, said Anise with a gentle smile. In truth, I probably could have gone to heaven. The wings on my back are proof of that. Hamel, so you don't have to feel sorry for me and you don't have to be sad. I chose not to go to heaven of my own volition. Why not? Asked Eugene. There were certain things he could not understand. Anise was strong. Whatever the Holy Empire tried, it would have been impossible to capture Aints if she had resisted. You lived in the Holy Empire for a long time, then suddenly decided to embark on a pilgrimage. So why? What happened to you? Why did you end up like that? And why is Christina? Eugene asked a barrage of questions. He could not understand. Anise did not give an answer but instead looked up at the sky. The deep darkness of the night was slowly giving way to the faint light of morning. After a moment her lips parted. I tried to disappear, she said with a smile. I went to your grave for the last time, prayed and made up my mind to disappear. The Pope and the cardinals implored me to sacrifice myself for the next imitation incarnation, but they could not control me. If Anise had decided to disappear, no one in Eurus could have stopped her. In fact, Anise left Eurus without encountering any problems and she arrived in the Nahama desert. But you? I just changed my mind, said Anise with a smile while shaking her head. I don't like the idea of sacrifice and I did not want to dedicate myself to Eurus, the place I despised. However, in that desert on my way to your grave, I was struck with a sudden thought. Hamel, you sacrificed yourself for the world. I know you would not call it a sacrifice, but everyone who witnessed your death saw your action as a sacrifice. You sacrificed your life for the world. You were like that before as well. You always stood at the forefront with a determination to kill the demon kings, knowing well that your body would be ruined. It was painful for Eugene to listen to her words. He dropped his eyes and clenched his fist, wanting to say something, but his lips refused to part. After a while he finally managed to speak. There was no helping it. The words he finally decided upon after hesitating were unattractive, even in his opinion. The castle of the Demon King of Incarceration was terrible. It wasn't a place suitable for Vermouth to take the lead. The same with Molen, obviously, since he was a complete moron. Someone had to take the lead and open the way. I was most suited to do so. I don't want to talk about that right now. Everyone agreed then. Yes, that's right, Hamel. As you say, someone had to take the lead and open the way, and you're also right in that you were the right person for the task. And as a result you died, said Anise. I never blamed any of you for my death. All of you said countless times along the way that it would be dangerous to climb any further. Everyone wanted to retreat and reorganize. It was my choice to reject your opinions. It was my choice to continue forward, and I died because of my actions, answered Eugene firmly. But do you think we wouldn't be sad about your death? Anise asked. Eugene was staring up ahead. The sun was slowly peeking out from its slumber in the distance. In the end you sacrificed yourself and I ran away because I didn't want to sacrifice myself. Hamel, I'm quite capricious and there was no special reason behind my choice. The sun's rays in the desert were scorching and bright. To tell you the truth, trying to find your grave was a challenge. Sienna was in seclusion. Or rather, it was commonly known that she was in seclusion, so I had to wander through the desert, fumbling through my memories. Anise chuckled while reliving her memories. Many thoughts passed through my mind as I wandered for a long time. What if I disappeared like this? It would have been a nasty gift for Eurus, no doubt. But so what? I was a miracle, but regardless of whether I disappeared, Eurus would have created another saintess the same as before. Of course, they couldn't have created a saintess as good as me. If only the world had obtained complete peace, Anise would not have had to contemplate a future without her existence. Above all else, however, the biggest reason for my worry was that I knew I would not live on for much longer. I am indeed close to perfection, but I'm not truly complete. I was destined to die before long, to disappear and ascend to heaven. If she had not been close to death, Anise would have been without worry, both regarding her own existence and about the future saintess of Eurus. However, Anise was bound for death before long, and she knew that the Holy Empire needed a new saintess. But Anise did not want to cooperate with the subject of her contempt. Since 3 demon kings had been taken care of, she wanted to forego the sense of responsibility she had left. Well, that was what she desired, but on her way to the grave of her soul-deceased companion, She remembered how he had run rampant while threatening to kill all the demon kings. She remembered the ignorant, mannerless mercenary. Even at the moment of his death, he had left no will to his comrades. He had not thought it necessary since Hamel truly believed that the rest of his companions would eliminate all the demon kings. He trusted that the world would be brought to peace just as they had all hoped. But there were still 2 demon kings left in the world, and Anise would soon die. "Priests of Uruz came to persuade me while I was wandering the desert," said Anise. Dawn was ascending and Anise continued with her back to the light. "That's when I decided to be fickle. I returned to Uruz with them and took my own life. I had no desire or intention of conceiving an unwanted child like my mother. Suicide was a choice I was willing to make to rebel against this filthy country." "So that's how you became an angel?" asked Eugene while staring at her wings. "Yes," answered Anise with a smile. "My body was dead but my soul remained. The light tried to lead me to heaven but I refused to ascend. Just like that I remained in this world." She paused, then turned her eyes toward Christina, continuing, "And I was able to dwell in that child." Eugene felt a chill run down his back at her nonchalant answer. Before long, a chuckle escaped from his lips. "You're truly a snake-like woman, do you know that? Sienna and I always talked about you behind your back. Maybe you don't know this, Hamel, but snakes are also symbols of regeneration and eternal life," retorted Anise with an unchanged smile. She showed no signs of displeasure. "I actually did not intend for all of this to happen. I chose not to ascend to heaven, because I thought I was still unworthy. And the reason I could dwell in that child was—" Christina was still sound asleep with her eyes closed. Anise approached her and gently stroked Christina's cheek, looking at her with a gaze full of meaning. "Just as I was special, this child was also special." The Holy Empire of Uruz transformed Anise's corpse into a relic. But rather than transplanting it into the Saintess, they sought to clone the one who neared perfection. Over the course of 300 years there were numerous failures. It wasn't a matter of whether the clone had a soul, since souls could be extracted and transplanted. The deadliest and most difficult problem to overcome was the compatibility between the soul and the cloned body. The failed copies were sent directly to the Fount of Light without even being granted a chance to become a candidate. But the Saintess could not be absent from the world. So Uruz put forth incomplete Saintesses who had been transplanted with the relics created from other incomplete copies. Of course, once they perished, those Saintesses became a part of the Fount as well. After countless failures, a near-perfect replica was born, a baby abandoned in a monastery. Her soul showed greater aptitude and harmony than the existing experiments. Anise's relic, which was kept top secret, was given to the replica, and the result wasn't a failure. The child, a clone of Anise, showed almost perfect harmony with the sacred relic. The clone was named Christina and was closely monitored in a monastery until she was 10 years old. A single seizure or an incident would have resulted in her removal, but Christina never once experienced an episode. Thus, Christina was taken in as Cardinal Rogerus' adopted daughter, and she became the only Saintess candidate of her time. In terms of completeness, this child is superior to me. This child won't have to prepare herself for death, unlike me, and she will be able to live for a really long time just like Sienna. Although she doesn't have a stigmata yet, sooner or later she will be able to perform miracles without bleeding from her scar," explained Anise. "Anise. The miracle's end is not far off," continued Anise. "Soon I will return to this child. Nothing will change. She will still be Christina Rogerus, and I will dwell in her as a spiritual being." "Hamel, don't feel regret. This is not heaven, but we were able to reunite like this. Although I won't be able to help you directly, as part of this child, I can bless and protect you on your journey." "Anise. I think everything has been under the guidance of the light. The believers of light have gone astray, but he still loves all his believers and provides us with the guidance of light. And through this miracle I was led to you. For you to have been chosen by the Holy Sword, and for the Holy Sword to have not lost its light here. All of that is the will of light. The mission we failed to accomplish 300 years ago you will—" Eugene suddenly interrupted her. "You and Sienna wrote the fairy tale together, didn't you?" Anise stopped talking. She slowly removed her hand from Christina's cheek, then looked up at Eugene with eyes of disbelief. Don't you think that question was kinda inappropriate given the conversation we were having, the atmosphere and the whole situation? Should I cry then? Asked Eugene. I don't want to see your crying face, answered Anise. But it's not like I can get angry either. I did enough of that earlier and you said you didn't want to see me cry. I don't really want to cry either, said Eugene. He grumbled while walking up to Anise. I knew since 300 years ago that there was something fucked up with the Holy Empire, not that I ever expected it to be beyond any common fuckery. But what can I do about it? That's just how it was. He stretched out a hand toward Anise. In the end you died and became an angel. It was your choice not to go to heaven. There is a God after all and heaven is real. That's enough. The fact that Christina is your clone and that you dwell in her. There's nothing I can do about that either. All of that's already in the past, he said while taking Anise by the hand. However, such things will not happen in the future. Once I kill the 2 remaining demon kings, the Holy Empire will no longer need the Saintess. If they try to create more Saintesses in such a world, I will personally end all believers of light in this world. PFF. Eugene continued, what I have to worry about now is whether to take the heads of the Pope and the other cardinals. I probably shouldn't. The Holy Empire is too big and I can't ignore its forces. I ultimately need them for the upcoming wars. However, I will make sure that they won't be able to do shit like this in the future. Anise giggled while covering her mouth. That is so like you, Hamel. You haven't answered my question yet. It was you and Sienna who wrote the children's book, right? So why was I the only one written like a complete idiot? Eugene grumbled while helping Anise to her feet. He stared directly into her eyes while urging for an answer. Why did you give me a shitty name like Stupid Hamel? Did you really have to torture me like this even after 300 years? Why am I stupid? Are you really asking because you don't know? Asked Anise. Would I be asking if I knew? No matter how much I think about it, it doesn't make sense. If you really wanted to call anyone stupid, it should have been Molen, not me. Eugene truly thought so. Brave Hamel, stupid Molen. It was perfect. The corner of her mouth curled up into a smile as Anise looked up at Eugene. I see that you're still the same as before, she said. What do you mean by? But he wasn't given a chance to finish his retort. Her lips were suddenly before him and pressed against his own. He tried to step back in surprise but he couldn't. Before he knew it, her arms had wrapped around his neck and prevented him from moving. A tongue slipped in through his lips and Eugene stared with incredulous eyes. He could only see Anise smiling with her eyes. Phew. Their lips parted after a while. Anise released her shackles and pushed his chest away. This is why you are stupid. Please apologize to Sienna for me. I don't know if she will understand, but what's she going to do? I'm already dead. Wah. Stupid Hamel, said Anise while slightly stroking her lips with her tongue. You are, in a way, even dumber than Molen. Then she started to disappear. Eugene's eyes widened. She was clearly running away. If she had disappeared normally, he would have shed tears of sadness, but he wasn't in a state to feel any sorrow. Hey, he shouted. This is not goodbye, Hamel. I will be protecting you from inside the child. I get it, so apologize before you go, roared Eugene, grabbing her hand. Apologize for calling me a bigger moron than Molen. And, that just now was my first time with this. Oh dear, muttered Anise while shaking her head with a sincere expression of regret. Do you think it was a first only for you? Please make sure to tell Sienna. I'm sorry, but that's just how things are. Those were the last words Anise uttered. Eugene stood blankly as her figure crumbled into particles of light. But the light didn't fade away. Rather, it permeated Christina. It wasn't just Anise either. The fount of light, the source of the fount, and everything around them scattered into light. The fading light soared into the morning sky, and the darkness of the night was finally laid to rest. It was truly a beautiful sight, but instead of looking up, Eugene just gently caressed his own lips. Ha. After standing still for a long while, he started to laugh dejectedly. Chapter 197. The Fount of Light. 9. The pipes could no longer draw any more water. The fount of light, the filters at the source, everything was gone. It wasn't just the water either. The spheres connected to the pipes as well as the relics contained within. None of it was left behind. Eugene glanced back at Christina. She was being supported by the wind but was still unconscious. But Eugene felt that it was for the better. The things he didn't want her to see disappeared neatly, but Eugene preferred that she didn't even see the old pipes left behind. "What?" said Eugene. He had placed his hand inside his cape with the intention of doing a clean sweep, but Mare had grabbed his finger as if she had been waiting. She accompanied the moonlight sword out of his cloak, riding on his finger. "You bastard," said Mare. "What? You are. Sir Eugene, you are a bastard," repeated Mare while pointing her quivering fingers at Eugene. How shameless. How could you do something so shameless? Right in front of me to boot," she shouted. "No. Well, if you think about it, it wasn't technically." Eugene hastily gave his excuse, but Mare wasn't willing to listen. "Lies. Sir Eugene, you are a liar. You could have avoided it if you wanted to. But you didn't. No, it was far from avoiding it. Why, your lips. The lips touched and tongue. You stayed still even when the tongue slid in," exclaimed Mare. Eugene continued, "Well, that's..." Mare, listen, when a human is faced with a situation that's completely out of their expectations and incomprehensible, their body stiffens and they lose control. You stop thinking and freeze on the spot. And because of the aftermath of ignition, my body was... Lies. You're moving just fine now," Mare shouted. "Strictly speaking, it's not me that's moving right now, but Tempest's wind that's..." "Arg," screeched Mare, "whatever the case. Sir Eugene, you were being so sloppy that even I could have stabbed you to death with a dagger. Do you think I would have ever imagined something like that happening?" Eugene retorted, desperately seeking to soothe Mare's fury, albeit not very successfully. Mare stomped her feet with a huff. "I just don't understand. Sir Eugene, you have a very handsome face right now, but not in your past life. I've also seen Sir Hamill's face every day in Akron, but to be completely honest, I've never thought that he was handsome, not even for a second. That's a bit hurtful. I don't think it was bad enough that I deserved to be called ugly wherever I went," muttered Eugene. "I feel this every time we talk about this topic, but Sir Eugene, you are very confident, even arrogant. Your claims are completely unfounded. How could you possibly have such confidence in your face with the great vermouth right next to you?" asked Mare. "Well, I admit that I might have been slightly uglier than vermouth, but I was much better looking than Mullen. And being handsome isn't necessarily being good looking. The atmosphere I exuded was very handsome, if you know what I mean," answered Eugene. Completely mad. "It's just that the video in Akron failed to capture my atmosphere. Well, no, even there. What is it? Weren't my proportions pretty good? My face was rather small, I had wide shoulders and a muscular, chiseled body," explained Eugene. "Bastard," muttered Mare. But Eugene didn't stop there. He kept going. "And the scar on my face was pretty cool too. My confidence isn't groundless at all. In my previous life, I never met anyone who ever called me ugly to my face." Mare retorted, "That's because you killed anyone who said such a thing, Sir Eugene. Anyways, you're still bad, Sir Eugene. I still don't understand how you could do such a thing in front of me." Thump, thump, thump. Mare stormed Eugene, stomping her feet, and it didn't look like she would stop anytime soon. Feeling unfairly blamed, Eugene shouted back while drawing the moonlight sword out of its sheath. "Oi, did I do it? I was tricked. I'm also a victim here. So why are you only blaming me? A victim? How truly, absolutely, positively shameless. Sir Eugene, don't lie to me. You were enjoying it on the inside," screamed Mare. "I didn't enjoy it. Really, I just couldn't move because I was so surprised. And it was sad as well. After all, Anise, one of my comrades, is dead. I won't ever get to meet her again in this life," said Eugene with a gloomy face while placing down the moonlight sword on his side. Mare hesitated for a moment when she saw Eugene's drooping shoulders. She felt a sense of regret. In her moment of anger, she had inadvertently caused Eugene to feel an irreconcilable loneliness. But Lady Sienna is still alive. While thinking so, she coughed before saying curtly, "I'm going to tell on you to Lady Sienna later." Yes, yes, answered Eugene. The moonlight sword started to radiate light. The creeping moonlight removed all the machinery underground, and after checking the empty room one more time, Eugene turned around. He strolled through the ruined temple, passing by the corpses without care. He saw that some were still breathing, but whether they lived or died was none of Eugene's business. He had already rampaged in his fury. After running wild, helping them would be like playing a game of cat and mouse with them. Did I screw myself over? He was struck with such worries as well. Now that everything had settled, the intense anger and hatred had died down. Along with it, logical thoughts also slowly returned. What should he do now? He had killed a cardinal, one of the captains of the Blood Cross Knights, as well as a high-ranking inquisitor. They weren't your everyday, ordinary members of the church. Furthermore, apart from the 3 high-profile figures, he had killed over 100 people today. It had been slightly excessive. He had gone full Hamel crazy without even thinking about the repercussions of his actions. In his defense, he had given them a warning. It wasn't like he intended to kill them from the beginning either. However, they ignored his warning and picked a fight with him, while completely convinced that they were in the right. He had been irked that they tried to send him back without seeing reason. It wouldn't matter if I'm the only one implicated, but the problem is the Lionheart clan. The Emperor of Kiel was greedy for what the Lionhearts possessed, and it was obvious that a conflict would arise between the empires if Eurus held Eugene responsible for the current situation. If that were to happen, the Emperor would undoubtedly try to pin the blame on the Lionheart clan. However, Eugene would make sure that it unfolded differently. He had no intention of keeping quiet about this crazy issue. He could simply silence the Holy Empire's opinion with the Holy Sword, since they would only be denying the light if they chose to disagree. The power that the Lionhearts accumulated over 300 years was considerable. Thus it was impossible for Kiel to expel the entirety of the Lionheart family from the Empire. If a settlement could be made, then they would either throw me in jail or banish me. But perhaps they wouldn't go as far as to banish him. Eugene was simply too talented to be banished for this problem. After all, what would Kiel gain from expelling Eugene? Absolutely nothing. Moreover, the moment Eugene was deported, all the other nations would go crazy trying to take him in. I think they might throw me in jail and try to coax me. No, but that's only the case if Eurus makes a big scene out of this. If the Pope wants to bury the whole issue, then there's nothing Kiel can do. As long as Eugene could keep the Pope's mouth shut, the majority of the problems would be solved. But how? Eugene had faced the fanatics of light in this temple, and they had labeled Eugene's actions as being corrupt. In their perspective, the light had not chosen wrong, and Eugene Lionheart's abilities were fit for the hero. However, Eugene Lionheart had fallen. It was an invincible logic. The fanatics could claim that their actions were based on true faith while cleverly avoiding the true meaning of light. After seeing that the paladins and inquisitors had been set on such a mindset, Eugene wondered if he could even hold a proper conversation with their superior, the Pope. If I reveal that I'm Hamel. So far, he had been given a free pass by revealing his identity from the past. However, he was up against the Pope of the Holy Empire this time around. He felt that simply revealing his identity as Hamel wouldn't be sufficient. What if he got the Holy Sword to emit light? No, that wouldn't be enough either. Something more. Something more like a miracle. Why don't you come down if you've awakened? Grumbled Eugene, glancing backward. Christina flinched. She had been allowing her limp body to float in the wind. Eugene continued, both my body and mind are in a mess right now, so it's hard for me to keep this up. Ehem. Christina descended with a dry cough and didn't raise her head even after touching the ground. Her clothes were already completely dry from the fount's water, but Christina continued to pull and shake the hem of her clothes as if she felt uncomfortable. Eugene called out while taking a step back. He saw that her expression was rather complex and her ears red under her disheveled blonde hair. What do you know? Asked Eugene. Ehem. Christina coughed a few times before raising her head by an inch. Her face was red, and as soon as she met his gaze, she immediately lowered her head once more. Eugene's expression grew even more complex when he noticed her blatant response. Oi, he called out. Sir Hamel, stammered Christina. Oh, I know that's the past life, so I will just call you Sir Eugene. Yes, that's the right thing for me. I asked you what you knew, repeated Eugene. Well, the thing is, Lady Anice's memories came to me. Well, not only her memories. It's like her consciousness became a part of me, sputtered Christina while grabbing her head, not realizing that she was speaking gibberish. It was only natural for her to be confused. Anice's soul was resting inside her, And although it would have been as such since a long time ago, the incident had awakened Anis's soul. So they now shared a consciousness, and Christina also received Anis's memories. As a result, Christina came to learn what the saintess truly was, what kinds of rituals had been held in the Fount of Light, and who she truly was. Everything came to Christina as a brutal truth, denying most of what she had believed all her life. Although she knew what was true and what was false, it was quite difficult for her to take it all in right away. Not only that, but Eugene Lionheart was supposedly the reincarnation of stupid Hamel from 300 years ago. Please understand, Hamel. It will be difficult for this child to accept everything at once, so please be patient and... Christina quickly clasped her hands over her lips when she started speaking without meaning to. Eugene's eyebrows twitched as he looked down at Christina, who had collapsed in surprise. "Anis," he called out. No, I am not Lady Anis," answered Christina. But what was that just now? She had spoken without meaning to, and her head was a mess. It was filled with things that were difficult to understand, things she didn't want to understand. And at the very end was a face that was too close for comfort, trembling eyes, the soft brush of their lips, and what wrapped around her tongue as, "Ah!" screeched Christina before clasping her hands together and praying. "I didn't expect that you would receive that memory as well." "What?" Christina raised her head in surprise as a voice resounded in her head. "I startled you without meaning to. I hope you understand. I did think about leaving you behind and departing for heaven, but for both you and Hamel, I think it would be best for me to remain here for the time being." Eugene could not hear Anis's voice, but he had a rough idea of the current situation from Christina's expression of shock and from the way she looked around as if she was hearing things. "This voice is," muttered Christina as her expression slowly stiffened. She remembered the first revelation she heard. Eugene Lionheart is the hero chosen by the light, and Vermouth's soul did not enter heaven. It was the same voice, the voice of the light. "I was simply acting as the messenger. The message was not a lie. Although the God of Light is not as omnipotent as you or others might think, he is real. However, he cannot intervene directly in the matters of this world," Anis continued. Christina's shaking slowly subsided. "So do not deny the existence of the light. You are... there's no helping it if you don't want to identify yourself as the saintess, but your existence and power are definitely miracles. If you want to use your miracles for Hamel, for Eugene Lionheart, then I will help you. Lady Anis. I know. I have been through the same thing as you, and I have always been watching you ever since you were young. I know what you've experienced, and it's only natural for you to doubt the light after you've realized the whole truth. However, Christina, that doesn't matter. Even if you distrust the light, it doesn't change the fact that your existence is a miracle. Nor will the light leave you in disappointment because you distrust it." Christina continued to pray silently. He was starting to understand little by little. If the terrible ritual in the Fount of Light had progressed to completion, Christina's blood would have been replaced by the water from the fount. If everything had gone according to schedule afterward, Christina would have been baptized by the sacred relic of the Holy Emperor in the audience chamber. Then Christina's back would have been engraved with a stigma, just like Anis's. "I do not want that. Even if you were made more complete than I was, a forcibly engraved stigma will eat away at your life. That's why I cannot leave you yet." Christina slowly closed her eyes. It was confusing and shocking, but she understood. Anis would remain inside her for the time being and support the miracles Christina summoned with her own divine power. Anis's soul would replace the role of the stigma. Anis had perished long ago but had refused to enter heaven. She had remained behind in this world to keep her promise to her dead comrade. But even after reuniting with her comrade, she still refused to enter heaven. It was to see her mission from 300 years ago to completion. In the future, Anis would work from within Christina, bearing Christina's burden and pain in her stead. One day, when Christina no longer needed her help, Anis would finally spread her wings and fly to heaven. Tears streamed down Christina's face even though her eyes were closed. It was a truly noble act. Anis refused the comfort of death and insisted on feeling the pain of her soul to try to save the world. Although the saintesses created by the Holy Empire were fake, artificial beings, Christina could not see her predecessors as fake. Even if they had been created artificially, all of them had been true saintesses. "Do you not drink the holy water?" "What? It doesn't seem like you enjoy it, but..." If you truly pity me, please enjoy holy water on my behalf from now on. And if you ever feel a difficult, shameful urge towards Hamel, I am willing to do it in your stead. What are you talking about? I truly enjoy how innocent you are. I think I will have quite the fun from now on teasing you. Anise giggled inside Christina's head, but instead of answering, Christina recited a short prayer. Are you done? Asked Eugene. Ahem. Tell Anise. It might be impossible right now, but when I see her in heaven after I die, I'm going to beat the crap out of her, said Eugene. Truthfully, he wanted to pummel her right this moment. But if he followed his desire, wouldn't it be Christina who suffered instead? Eugene clicked his tongue and shook his head. This is not goodbye, Hamel. As part of this, child, I can bless and protect you on. He had not bothered to listen till the end, but he never imagined that this was what she meant. Eugene felt grateful not to have shed tears when Anise disappeared. He was afraid just to imagine how Anise would have teased him by borrowing Christina's words if he had shed tears. Let's just make sure we distinguish it so we don't get confused. Christina, you call me Eugene, all right? Anise will call me Hamel anyways, explained Eugene. Yes, Sir Hagin. What? No. Nothing, Sir Yumel. What are you doing? Christina responded after slapping herself on the lips a few times. Lady Anise is very mischievous. According to the legend, she is supposed to be a warm person like the morning sun. You can't take an old tale word for word. I mean, look at me, right? The stories say that I'm stupid, but how is that even remotely accurate? Grumbled Eugene. Christina opened her eyes to a slit and glanced at Eugene. For some reason, it felt as if she could hear a giggle in her head. So what are you going to do now? Asked Christina. It's impossible to return to the great cathedral, answered Eugene. He didn't think anything good would come from returning. The biggest issue now was his condition. It wasn't so bad that he couldn't lift a finger, but he would need to rest completely for a few days to recover. I think it would be best to destroy the warp gate here and hole up somewhere to recover. After that. Well, if I could, I would just run away without trying to fix anything. Are you serious? Asked Christina. Would I be lying? I know I lost my cool and ran wild, but you never really think about fixing what you caused when you lose your cool and rampage. But what can I do? If I do really run away, the head of our family might lose what little hair he has left. He's stressed enough already, mumbled Eugene while staggering forward. Christina belatedly came to his side and supported him. Anyways, if I plan to at least pretend to make things right, I should get back to normal conditions first. Because of me, said Christina. It's not just because of you, so don't say things like that. And what if it's because of you? Why should you feel guilty about it? You're the one who was thrown into shit, said Eugene. A faint smile spread on her face at his harsh words. Mare glared at Christina. Don't get too close. What? Don't get too close to him, she repeated. I'm only supporting. Ah, with a smile, Christina nodded. She raised Eugene's feeble body and put him behind her back. Hey, shouted Mare. This reminds me of Salmar Forest, said Christina while supporting Eugene's buttocks with her hands. Eugene's face crumpled with humiliation, and Mare was struck speechless by Christina's bold move. However, Christina paid them no mind and instead continued forward while patting Eugene's buttocks. The morning sun was warm. Chapter 198. The Crusader, 1. In the vicinity of a completely destroyed temple, there was a huge hole that didn't fit well with the surrounding terrain. This was the hole that had been made by Eugene a few days ago. A tall woman stood at the entrance of the hole. She tilted her head to the side while looking down into the hole, which was too deep to see the end of. Although a half-moon was shining faintly in the night sky, a wave of darkness began to spread from the woman's back. The darkness created by the woman enveloped her surroundings like a fog and began to sink deep into the hole. After the darkness spread completely, the woman walked down into the hole, her feet utterly bare of any protection. Just a few steps into the hole and she had already found corpses. It looked like they had desperately tried to climb out of the hole. While this was perhaps due to the difficulty of climbing out of a hole this deep with their broken bodies, most of the collapsed corpses also had what looked like wounds from a snake's fangs. Most of these corpses had their fingertips crusted with blood and dirt and looked like they had been crushed. In the days since their deaths, their bodies had already stiffened in rigor mortis, but the looks on their faces, contorted in pain and horror, remained. The woman examined each of these faces one by one as she headed deeper and deeper into the hole. The thin cotton veil covering her lips twitched. With each step she took downwards, an unpleasant stench weighed ever more heavily in the space around her. It was the smell of blood and spilled intestines. The smells of the rot that started days after the death of a body. A stench of death had concentrated in this hole from countless corpses. The woman felt slightly aroused by the smell. In this peaceful era that hadn't seen any wars break out, it was hard to find a place like this where so many corpses were buried in one location. Especially corpses like these. These weren't the worthless corpses of a person with little to no status. The woman scanned the uniforms worn by the corpses. The red cross on their chests was the sigil of the Knights of the Blood Cross, and that red cloak was the symbol of the Inquisition's Maleficarum. There were well over 100 corpses. Though not all of them had died instantly. Quite a few of them looked like they could have survived, but they hadn't been able to escape this pit due to their severe injuries and exhaustion. However, as human lives were very tenacious, a few people could still be seen clinging to their last breaths. With dying voices they chanted prayers or called out to their god in a murmur. There were also a few voices begging for help while some had completely lost their minds and were just muttering incomprehensibly. The woman paid no attention to them. She had no reason to save them. On the contrary, the darkness spreading from her with each step she took was claiming their lives. The souls that were collected by this weren't able to ascend towards the sky, instead dissolving into the darkness. At the very bottom of the hole, the woman's steps halted. Down here it was so dark that the woman couldn't darken it further. The smell of death that had been concentrated to its limits made every breath a joy. The woman lifted her veil slightly and took in the stench. Then she looked a bit further down with delight in her eyes. There wasn't any land visible at the bottom of the hole. There weren't any piled-up bodies either. Instead, crimson blood had pooled up at the bottom like it was rainwater. Within that pool of blood, the debris of corpses could be seen floating around. This made the woman's lips, which were pressed tight, stretch in a thin smile. Then, her purple eyes glowing, she took a step toward the pool of blood. Boom! A ripple spread across the blood pool as she took that step forward. The surface of the pool turned clear, exposing what lay beneath. There were bodies that looked like they had been chewed upon, but there was still too much of this now clear blood for it to have all been spilled from these corpses. Well now, I just wanted to see what had happened to cause Atterix's death, the woman commented to herself. In the woman's opinion, he was a rare, enlightened priest. In this current era, black magic didn't receive an unconditional rejection. While it was impossible for a demon folk to rise to the position of a bishop, if they wished they really could enter the Church of Light and become a priest. However, it was hard to imagine that an inquisitor of all people had held a slight desire to comprehend black magic instead of having a huge prejudice against it. In the past, after having secretly been in contact with him for some time, this woman had personally met Atterix. At that time, Atterix had shown an incorruptible attitude even as he asked the nemesis of his organization for advice on black magic. No, rather than just incorruptible, at that time Atterix's attitude was close to intimidating. We, the Inquisition, can hunt you down at any time. As such, if you value your life, you should cooperate with our demands. The woman had immediately realized that Atterix's request was nothing more than a facade for his true intentions. This was because the advice that Atterix had requested regarding black magic wasn't on how to deal with it as an enemy. The woman had expected him to fall one day. She had wanted to see the moment when Atterix's arrogant delusion that the light would forgive and condone any injustice that he committed was shattered. If a cleric who had reached such a level were to fall, what kind of unique flavor might permeate his soul? It was curiosity and greed that had led the woman to secretly brand the young Atterix. There's not even a trace left of Atterix's corpse, the woman noted. His soul isn't here either. Did he rise to heaven like he so hoped for and was confident about? Or perhaps the soul itself had disappeared. But I really wanted to see his final moments in person. The woman wasn't talking to herself. She was staring at a being floating in the center of the pool of blood. All of their limbs had been severed, leaving only a torso and a head. Yet, having been left in a condition where death was certain, they had somehow managed to survive. Depending on the use of blood magic, you really can achieve immortality comparable to one of the undead, the woman whispered. Were you aware? You may have classified blood magic as being different from black magic, But the truth is that isn't necessarily the case. Blood magic was originally developed from those vampires who like to suck out people's blood and drink it. Himoria continued to cling to her last breaths that seemed like they might cut out at any moment. Even among the demon folk, vampires possess a particularly high class of immortality. They can be revived as long as there's a single drop of blood. Blood magic should be able to do the same, right? Instead of needing to feed on others' blood like a vampire, you should be able to multiply your own blood with mana and magic. Though in your case it seems like you've gone past what ordinary blood magic can heal, the woman observed. You? Himoria's lips opened. Glaring at the woman, she squeezed out in a hoarse voice, Amelia Merwin. One of the 3 mages of incarceration. The desert's dungeon master. The Blackthorn. Death Answerer. Among the black wizards who had signed a contract with the Demon King of Incarceration, Amelia Merwin was known to be particularly eccentric and powerful, so she had many nicknames. The Ashur Desert, which she ruled over, had been designated a restricted zone by the Kingdom of Nahama, and all access was forbidden. Why are you here? Himoria squeezed out. Didn't I already tell you? I came here to see Adarix's corpse. It's unfortunate that I wasn't able to see him fall while he was still alive, but as long as his corpse remained, I was thinking of making him into an undead. Could it be you don't know? As long as the corpse remains and it's only been dead for a few days, it can be used to summon the deceased soul, Amelia said as she smiled and raised her hand. A staff made from a goat's head and several other bones appeared in her hand. Buzz. The dark power, released from her staff evaporated the blood. Amelia continued, however, Adarix's corpse is missing. Although there are a lot of other corpses, they are all useless and worthless. But it seems I did well to come all the way down to the bottom of this deep hole. It's like I found a jewel on the sidewalk. Let go. Himoria hissed. Amelia's dark power had wrapped around Himoria. Himoria thrashed her body, trying to somehow escape her grasp, but the only resistance her dismembered body could offer was arching her back and shaking her head. The truth was that Himoria did have other means of resistance available to her. It was that her blood magic was being suppressed by Amelia's dark power. If she could just get a little closer, Himoria was confident that she would get a chance. The moment Amelia's dark power dragged Himoria's body closer, patterns appeared on each of Himoria's cheeks. Stop. Himoria roared. The simpler the command, the stronger the power. She didn't need to keep a hold of Amelia Merwin for long. Himoria just needed her to stop for a moment. Himoria's jaws spread wide, then she tore a bite out of the air. Crack. Amelia's head tilted to the side. More than half of her neck had been bitten off and disappeared. The blood gushing out stained Amelia's cotton veil and her clothes red. If she was only human, then she would definitely be dead. However, Amelia Merwin didn't die. Her tilted head straightened once more. The spray of blood abruptly stopped. While feeling for the missing part of her neck, Amelia chuckled. Word arts on top of blood magic. Both types of magic were once persecuted by the Holy Empire. And those fangs, Amelia trailed off as she stared at Himoria's sharp teeth. They weren't just simple teeth. Curses that were close to black magic had been boiled down into the form of a tooth. The idea of inserting teeth made through such a method into one's gums was insane, but you really have been designed to make optimal use of the magic that your body itself possesses, Amelia complimented. No matter how much someone is trained in magic from an early age, it would be hard to achieve your level of optimization. In the first place, if you had such talent, it should be displayed in other ways, but you seem to have specialized solely in blood magic and the word arts, while everything else isn't that great. Himoria's eyes trembled in fright. Amelia continued, it's honestly a surprise. To think that the Holy Empire, that the Inquisition would show such knowledge of both magic and black magic. Shut up, Himoria growled weakly. Ah, Amelia gasped faintly. It seems that you weren't aware? It's not just Adarix. Your Inquisition has made contact with black wizards in every era. I don't know who they were in contact with previously, but even before Adarix, I've given advice on black magic to 2 previous inquisitors. Himoria's face turned pale. What? Are you disappointed? Do you hate the fact that the Inquisition you serve actually has ties to the black wizards and to me, Amelia Merwin, at that? Why now, after having come so far? I actually rather admire them. Even for wizards, it's rare to see such dedication towards understanding black magic, all for the sake of their god. Amelia giggled as she probed her own wounds. Wherever her fingers went, new skin grew and the wounded flesh was reconnected. Ah, but even among them, Atterix was quite the interesting individual, Amelia sighed. Even though he knew nothing about the subject, he would still try to threaten me, and he showed such confidence that the light would continue to protect him unconditionally. A master. Don't insult my father. Himoria let out a scream as her body twisted futilely. Her father. A big smile spread across Amelia's face at those words. She strode over and grabbed Himoria by the hair. After forcefully pulling Himoria's head up, Amelia pressed her face close to Himoria and looked into her eyes. A chill went down Himoria's back as her spirits fell. The terror of death seemed to pour forth from the eyes that were locked with hers. Himoria couldn't say anything more and her body trembled in fear. Unable to hold on any longer, the lingering marks of her word arts disappeared from her cheeks. Your father. Amelia drawled out with a snicker as she grabbed Himoria's chin with her other hand. With this grip, Amelia forced Himoria's mouth open and grabbed onto one of the sharp teeth. Pupuput. Blood spurted from the gap where the tooth had forcefully been pulled out. However, Himoria wasn't even able to let out a scream. After turning the pulled-out tooth this way and that as she scanned it, Amelia shrugged her shoulders and asked, You ate humans, right? Himoria's face paled even further. From the corpses here as well as those who weren't quite corpses yet. Weren't they all your comrades? You actually devoured your own comrades to survive here at the bottom of this hole, Amelia accused. Himoria stammered, Oh, I didn't. Were you trying to make the excuse that you didn't eat them yourself? Aren't you aware of how ridiculous of an excuse that is? You used blood magic to drain the blood from the corpses here as well as those who were only half dead. You used them to restore your own blood and heal your wounds. If you had a few more days, you would probably have recovered enough to make it out of this hole on your own, Amelia said as she pushed her head down on top of Himoria's head. Splash. As Himoria's limbless body fell back into the pool of blood, she saw all the corpses that were submerged in the pool. In fact, the corpses were so severely damaged that it was hard to recognize that they had even once been human. It wasn't Himoria that had killed them. Himoria had just connected her blood to these deceased corpses to draw from them. Or at least that was what she had thought. I really like things like this, Amelia admitted cheerfully. Just the fact that an inquisitor who's meant to show unconditional obedience towards the light, actually secretly contacted a black wizard and studied black magic would be amusing enough. But to think that he would even father a child behind closed doors. Then to find out that that daughter would eventually go on to suck the lifeblood of her companions, both paladins and inquisitors, in order to survive. No. It's not true, Himoria desperately denied. I didn't. Amelia continued mercilessly. In the end, I find out that the daughter isn't even a proper human being, but instead some kind of chimera? I only came all this way to pick up your father's corpse, but, you are a much more entertaining find than your father. Himoria feebly lifted her head to look up at Amelia. Those purple eyes that were glowing in the midst of the darkness were terrifying. Himoria unconsciously chewed her bottom lip as she muttered a prayer. After turning yourself into this, are you really looking for the light to save you? Amelia mocked. I'm not a believer in the light, but I can still confidently say this. The light might not be a merciless asshole, but do you really think it would still take care of something like you who's done the things you've done? Himoria gasped. It was all for the light that I... Your father said the same thing. He probably even said those words before he died, right? If the light really was looking out for the both of you, then your limbs wouldn't have been chopped off and your father wouldn't have died. No, hold on. If the light really cared about this world in the first place, your father wouldn't have dared to make something like you. Your very existence is an insult to the light. Amelia spat. Bam. Her staff swung down onto Himoria's back. It seems that as an idiot you don't even know what kind of existence you are, so allow me to inform you. You are not a normal human being. Do you know what that means? You're a chimera made from mixing a human with various other things. Amelia enlightened her. Himoria's trembling came to a halt. You said that Atterix is your father? That's probably because part of your genes was copied from Atterix's semen and blood. But from my perspective, both as a wizard and as a black wizard, your relationship with Atterix is nothing more than a handful of sand. Don't you think so yourself? After having sucked in so much blood to survive these past few days, do you really think that the blood you've inherited from Adorix is thicker than the blood you have absorbed into your body? Amelia questioned. No, it's not true, Himoria weakly denied. What do you mean it's not true? Why deny such an obvious thing? I guess it does come naturally. You fanatics react to anything other than the light with denial. It's fine. I'll show some understanding. I would prefer it if your personality and the strength of your beliefs remain very, very strong, Amelia confessed as she used her dark power to lift Himoria's body into the air. That's what will make training you so fun. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Instead, I'll give you what you want. So what if your limbs have been chopped off? It's just a matter of restoring your limbs, right? By the way, what exactly is your name? Himoria didn't reply. She wasn't able to. The words that Amelia had let loose with a chuckle, the truths that Amelia had poured out so very casually as if she were only teasing, had shaken Himoria's mind. Aren't you going to talk? In that case, I'll have no choice but to hear it from you next time. Now then, from now on, I want you to understand it. The light didn't protect you. It didn't care for you while you were dying. Do you think that what you did was unavoidable? Yes, that's right. If the light really did care for you, then you wouldn't have had to suck the blood out of your comrades. Amelia said all this in a pleasant voice as she began dragging Himoria away. Do you know what that means? The light you serve isn't as kind as your prayers describe it to be. So, do you know what you should resent from now on? Amelia's voice sounded like it was coming from far away. In her faltering vision, Himoria saw a small light. But that light was being held in the hands of a devil. A devil that had approached Himoria while holding unbelievable and terrifying murderous intent and hatred for all the things that existed in this world. The light that had promised to protect Himoria and its other believers was outshone by the light in the devil's hands. Then she began to dance with the devil. Jurdarke. In her tightly clenched jaws, Himoria's teeth began to grind. 2 days after the end of the rituals that had been held at the Fount of Light, Eugene and Christina were staying in a tent that they had set up deep within a large forest. The tent was a magic artifact they had used while wandering the Samar rainforest. Although the recoil this time was light, Eugene still had to stay in bed for these past 2 days without straining himself. Christina had nursed Eugene while he was in this state, only heading out of the tent to hunt small animals and forage for herbs when the time came for their meals. Sometimes, if Mare offered to take over nursing Eugene, Christina would kneel down and offer her prayers. Although she no longer uttered her prayers out loud, she was still drawn to the light deep within her heart. Whenever this happened, she would hear Anissa's voice inside her head, and while listening to Anissa's voice, a soft light would envelop Christina's body. It seems that there's no need for us to turn on any lights at night, Mare cheekily commented. The light surrounding Christina was only moderately bright. Unlike the lights that could be summoned by magic or the sun in the sky, their eyes wouldn't hurt even after looking at this light for a long time. Christina was also quite warm, though not as warm as a campfire. Mare actually liked how comfortably warm Christina was, as it kept her from feeling far too hot no matter how close her hand got to Christina. I think it would be really nice to have her around when I want to read. It would also be good to snuggle up to her and sleep together during the cold winter. Mare stopped what she was saying to glare at Eugene. Of course, Sir Eugene, you aren't allowed to do that. When did I say that I even wanted to do that? Eugene protested. If Lady Anise ever takes over that body and tries to hug you, then you need to say it firmly, Mare instructed. Tell her that you can't do that. Understand? What am I, a kid? Eugene grumbled. You sometimes act like a child, Sir Eugene. Just stop talking to me and also keep some distance from her. Why do you keep bothering her when she's trying to pray? As Christina was kneeling, Mare was lying down with her head resting on Christina's thighs. I like how soft and fluffy this feels, Mare sighed in contentment. Although this feeling is one you might never experience for the rest of your life. Just because I said this, you're not allowed to secretly try and find out what it feels like. Just stop it already, Eugene grumbled as he undid the bandage wrapped around his left hand. Although the hand had been crushed 2 days ago, thanks to a miracle from Christina, it was now completely healed. Even the bones that had been shattered into pieces had fully healed during the time that the bandages were wrapped around his arm, and no nerves had been severed. Like I thought, the power of her miracles is stronger than before, Eugene observed. Although Christina's miracles were beyond all comparison to those performed by other clergymen even before now, the healing magic that she had used in the Samar rainforest had yet to have reached this level. This was all thanks to a niece dwelling within Christina. One day Christina would reach the point of being able to regenerate cut-off limbs like Anise had. Even as Eugene anticipated the coming of such a day, at the same time he felt concerned. In the end, wasn't this like they were holding back Anise, who had already died a long time ago, keeping her in this world to make her suffer? No, hold on. If we think of it like that, I'm the one you should feel sorry for in the first place. Why does a person who died 300 years ago have to be reincarnated and go through such a headache? Vermouth, that fucking bastard, Eugene silently cursed to himself. Anise hadn't known anything about Vermouth. Through Eugene she had learned that Vermouth had pierced a hole through Sienna's chest, but it didn't seem like she knew anything apart from that. It couldn't be helped. After returning from Helmuth, Anise hadn't had any further contact with Vermouth. It was because of the oath with the Demon Kings. Sienna wasn't the only one who had been disappointed that their fight had ended like that. Eugene hummed thoughtfully as he finished unwrapping the bandage and stood up. Christina also halted her prayers and opened her eyes. She turned to Eugene with slight concern in her eyes. "What are you so startled for?" "We were expecting someone to come looking for us," Eugene pointed out. Christina hesitated, but... "It's fine," Eugene said as he opened the entrance to the tent. Someone was approaching them from a distance. If they had wanted to, they could have hidden their presence and tried to sneak up on Eugene and the others, but instead, they were approaching with an obvious display of their arrival. It was so that they could alert Eugene's side and give them time to ready a response. "How polite of him," Eugene muttered as he pulled the holy sword out from his cloak. Although Eugene didn't know who it would definitely be a high-ranking priest within Eurus. Perhaps another cardinal? No. The presence approaching them today felt like something close to a knight. It had to be someone who was at least at the rank of a captain in the Knights of the Blood Cross. "No, it's different," Eugene frowned. It was even greater than that. Although there was still quite a distance between them, Eugene could already tell that the feeling of that person's presence was extremely heavy. It had to be a warrior comparable to Alcester, the commander of the White Dragon Knights, who was approaching them. So, is this the commander of the Blood Cross Knights? Eugene wondered as the figure drew nearer. It was the Crusader. Eugene stepped forward to meet him.